I drove the wagon down out of Pinto Hollow with Tom Halloran laid out flat in the bed behind me, and I will tell you that in 9 years of working a fighting man's corner, I never once thought the road would carry us back to Antler Creek. A man's home is the last place he wants seen when he is finished, and Tom was finished. The doctor in Cheyenne had said the hands were the end of it. I had wrapped those hands 1,000 times. Now they lay open on his chest like two broken birds, and he stared up at the sky going gray over the cottonwoods and said nothing at all. "You awake?" I asked him. "I know that ridge," he said. He did. We both knew it. I had been the one fool enough to ask him, 3 weeks back in a low room that smelled of liniment and lost money, where a man went when there was nowhere left to go. He had not answered me then. He had answered me by pointing the team north, and I had followed the pointing because that is what a second does. He follows the man even when the man is wrong, and especially when the man is broke. The valley opened below us the way I remembered him describing it, those long nights on the circuit when the whiskey loosened him. Antler Creek ran silver through good grass. There were horses on it. There had always been horses on it, he'd said, but I had taken that for a young man's exaggeration, the way you take everything a young man says about the place he left. It was not exaggeration. The grass was full of them, bays and grays, and a string of blood-bright sorrels moving easy along the water, and a set of pole corrals laid out as square and honest as anything I'd seen, and above the corrals, a low house with smoke standing straight up out of the chimney into the still cold morning. "That the Quill?" I said. "That was old man Ames's place," Tom said. His voice had gone careful. "Ames is likely dead. He was old when I was a boy. Somebody's running it. Somebody's always running it." He shut his eyes. "Drive on, Pell. Maddox Flat's another 4 miles. There'll be a livery I can sleep behind." I did not drive on. I am not proud of going against him, but I'd carried that man down off too many canvas floors to leave him sleeping behind a livery in the town that had raised him. And so I let the team have its head, and the team, being smarter than either of us, walked us straight down the wagon road toward the Quill, toward the smoke, toward whatever it was Tom Halloran had spent 15 years not coming home to. A woman came out onto the porch when the dogs set up. She had a rifle in the crook of her arm, the way a person carries a tool they hope not to use, and she stood with the morning behind her, so I could not see her face, only that she was tall and straight and unhurried, and that she watched us come the whole long way down without once calling out or stepping back inside. When we were close enough, she set the rifle against the porch post. She did it slow, deliberate, like she'd already decided we were no danger and wanted us to know she'd decided it. Then she came down the 2 steps into the yard and stood with her hands loose at her sides, and I saw her face, and I saw it change. It is a particular thing to watch 15 years go across a person's face in the space of a breath. I have seen men hit hard enough to forget their own names, and the look is something like it, the world rearranging itself faster than the body can keep up. She went pale under her weathering. Her mouth opened and shut, and then she got hold of herself, the way I would learn she got hold of everything, and she said, in a voice with not one tremor she'd allow into it, "Tom Halloran." Tom had sat up in the wagon bed. I don't know how. The man could barely lift a cup, but he'd gotten himself up against the sideboard, and he took his hat off with both ruined hands because that was the only way he could do it, and he said, "Nora." "You're hurt," she said. "I've been hurt before. Not like this." She came to the side of the wagon and looked down into it, looked at the hands, looked at the gray in his face, and she did not gasp or fuss, and she did not reach for him. She looked the way a person looks who is doing arithmetic. "You're not hurt like this from a fall." "No," Tom said. "You're hurt like this from doing what you left to do." "Nora." "Pelgarity," I said, lifting my own hat, because somebody had to say something and it was not going to be either of them. "I'm a friend of his. He's got no money and nowhere to be, and I'd have driven him to the flat, but the horses brought us here." She looked at me then, and there was something in her eyes that might have been gratitude and might have been the start of a hard laugh. "The horses brought you here," she said. "Of course they did. They're my horses, mister, and they know their own gait." She stepped back and opened the yard fence wider. "Bring him in. The bunkhouse is dry and there's a stove in it. I'm not putting him in the house." "I wouldn't ask you to," Tom said. "I know you wouldn't," she said. "You never once asked me for anything you needed. That was always the trouble." And she turned and walked back up to the porch and took up her rifle and went inside, and the door shut, not hard, just shut, and Tom Halloran let out a breath like a man who has been holding it for 15 years. I got him into the bunkhouse and onto a bunk and built up the stove, and while I worked he lay looking at the rafters, and after a while he said, "I should not have come." "The horses." "Don't tell me about the horses." But there was no heat in it. He was too tired for heat. "She built all this," he said. "You see it, all of it. The corrals, the string, that good grass kept good. Ames left her a sick old place going to weeds, and she built all of this." He turned his head to the wall. "And I left to go and become a man worth standing next to her, and here is what I became." He held up the hands an inch off the blanket and let them fall. "Get some sleep, pal. You've earned it more than I have. I want to tell you about Nora Ames before I tell you the rest, because if you take her for the woman waiting at the window, you will get the whole thing wrong. And getting her wrong was the mistake Tom himself spent the longest time making. Her father had run cattle badly and died owing money to 3 counties. She was 22 when he died, and the bank men came expecting to find a girl they could fold up and put away. What they found was a woman who had already sold off the worthless cattle, paid down the worst of the notes, and turned the place to horses, because horses, she told them flat, were the one thing this valley grew without trying, and a remount the cavalry would pay $40 for ate the same grass as a steer they'd take 10 for. She broke them herself. She kept the books herself. By the time Tom Halloran came home, she was selling horses to the army, to the stage company, to ranches 3 valleys over who would not buy from anyone else, and she had turned down, by the reckoning of the men at Maddox Flat who kept careful track of such things, every unmarried man between the Hollow and the Territory line. They said she was hard. I heard it said in town more than once, in that way men have of calling a woman hard when she has simply declined to need them. She was not hard. I came to know her well, and she was not hard. She was finished waiting, which is a different thing, and she had been finished waiting for a long time, and a man arriving broken in a wagon bed was not going to start it up again. That was what she had decided on the porch with the rifle. I watched her decide it. What she had not reckoned on, what none of us reckon on, was that deciding a thing and being done with it are not the same either. Tom slept 2 days. On the 3rd he was up, gray and unsteady, and he went out to the corrals because a fighting man cannot abide being still, and he stood at the rail watching a colt she had in the round pen, and Nora was in the pen with the colt and a coiled rope, and she did not tell him to leave. The colt was a bad one. I knew enough of horses by then to see it, a black 2-year-old with a wall eye and a grudge, fighting the rope, fighting the air, fighting the idea of being anything but free. Nora worked it the way I'd seen good corner men work a frightened young fighter, all patience and low voice, and the same motion over and over until the fear ran itself out. But the colt was strong and she was tired, and on the 4th or 5th pass it came around hard and caught her shoulder and put her into the rail, and I saw Tom Halloran move. 15 years and 2 ruined hands, and he came over that rail like the young man he'd been, got between her and the colt reared and he took it. Not with his hands. He couldn't make a fist, but with his shoulder and his body, turning it, the way you turn a thing that's bigger than you because you've spent your life learning that everything is bigger than you and you turn it anyway. The colt broke off and went to the far rail blowing. And Tom stood there in the middle of the pen, shaking, holding Nora up by the arm with a hand that couldn't grip, and the 2 of them looked at each other from about a foot apart for the first time in 15 years. "I had him," Nora said. "I know you did. I didn't need." "I know you didn't," He let go of her arm. It seemed to cost him. Old habit, stepping in, I'm sorry. She rubbed her shoulder and looked at him a long moment, and then she looked at his hands, really looked at them, the way she had not let herself look in the wagon. You can't close them, she said. No. At all. Doctor says the small bones are gone, says I'm lucky to hold a cup. He flexed them and they barely moved. I held the cup pretty good on the way here, made me feel like a champion. It was the first joke I'd heard him make in a month, and it surprised the laugh out of her, just a short one, bitten off, but a real one, and I saw it land on him like water on a man who's been a long time in the desert. She caught herself laughing and her face shut again, but it had happened, and we all three knew it had happened. Come up to the house for supper, she said. Both of you. I'm not feeding two grown men out of a bunkhouse stove like they're hired help I'm ashamed of. She coiled her rope. And Tom, don't read anything into it. It's supper. It's supper, he agreed. It was not just supper, but it took them a long while to admit it, and I had the dubious pleasure of sitting between them through most of it. The 15 years came out slow, over weeks, in pieces, the way a splinter comes out a little at a time and never without some blood. I got most of it sitting on the porch in the evenings while Tom learned, painfully, to be useful with hands that couldn't do the one thing hands are for. He could not rope. He could not fork hay worth a damn. But he found, to his own astonishment, that a horse did not care whether a man could make a fist. A horse cared about the thing underneath that, the stillness, the breath, the way a body holds itself when it's afraid and won't show it. And Tom Halloran, who had spent his life being afraid in front of crowds and not showing it, turned out to have more of that than any cowhand in the valley. Nora put him on the worst ones, the spooky ones, the soured ones, the ones that had been ruined by hard men with quick hands. He'd stand in the pen for an hour, 2 hours, doing nothing, just being there, until the animal decided he was furniture and not a threat, and then a little more and a little more, and I watched ruined-handed Tom Halloran gentle horses that grown men with good hands had given up on. He could not grip a rein. He learned to ride with his legs and his weight and his voice. Nora watched him do it from the rail, and her face did the thing it had done in the yard that first morning, 15 years going across it, except slower now, and not all backward. Here is the wound when it finally came out. It came out one night on the porch when the bottle I'd brought from town was lower than it should have been. You want to know why I left, Tom said. He was not asking me. He was asking the dark in the direction of the house where the lamp was lit in Nora's window. You don't have to tell me anything, I said. I was 19, he said, like I hadn't spoken. And she was the finest thing in this valley, and I was old man Ames's no-account fence rider making $9 a month. And I loved her so bad I couldn't see straight, and I knew, Pell, the way you know a thing at 19, that I had nothing to offer a woman like that. Nothing. A name nobody respected and not 2 dimes. He turned the cup in his ruined hands. And there was a man came through, ran fights out of the mining camps, and he saw me lick 3 teamsters outside the saloon, and he said, boy, you could make real money. Real money. And I thought if I went and made myself into something, made a name, made a stake, I could come back and stand in front of her father and stand in front of her and be worth the standing. I thought I had to win her, like a purse. And you told her this, I said. I told her I was leaving to make something of myself and that I'd come back and that she should wait. He laughed, low and terrible. I told a woman to wait. I didn't ask, I told her. Same as I told the colt to hold still today. He drank. I won. You know I won, Pell, you saw most of it. Made the name. Made the stake and lost it, made it again, lost it again, the way you do. And every year I told myself I wasn't worthy yet. One more purse, one more, and the years went and the hands went and I never came. Because the truth I couldn't look at was that I was never going to feel worthy. There was no purse big enough. I was always going to be old man Ames's no-account fence rider in my own heart, and so I just kept fighting, so I'd never have to find out whether she'd have me as I was. The lamp in Nora's window was still lit. I have wondered since how much of that she heard, the porch being close and the night being still. I think she heard all of it. I think that is why what happened next happened the way it did. She did not let on for 3 days. She worked him as hard as ever. And then on the 4th evening she came out and sat on the step below him, which she had never done, and she looked out at her horses in the last light and she said, "You great fool, I never asked you to be worth anything." Tom went very still. "You think I was sitting at that window waiting for you to come back rich," she said. "You think I turned down every man who came to that gate because I was holding out for the famous Tom Halloran?" She shook her head. "I turned them down because none of them were you, Tom. The you that left. The $9 fence rider who used to bring me a wild plum he'd ridden 6 miles out of his way to find, because he knew I liked them and he had nothing else to give. That boy was worth more than every purse you ever fought for, and you went and traded him in for a name, and you broke your hands trying to become a man I never once asked you to be." Her voice did not rise. It got quieter, which was worse. "I didn't wait for the champion. I'd have taken the fence rider any day of these 15 years. You're the only one who ever thought he wasn't enough." Tom Halloran, who I had seen take the worst that men could give him and stand back up, put his ruined hands over his face and could not say anything at all. "I'm not going to comfort you," Nora said, and she stood up. "You broke your own hands chasing your own foolishness, and I'll not pretend that doesn't make me want to shake you. But you're here, and you gentle a horse better than any man I've hired, and I find—" She stopped and chose the words, and I have always honored her for choosing them and not flinching from them. "I find I am not done with you after all, which makes me as big a fool as you are. Good night." And she went in. I would like to tell you that was the end of it, that the man simply stayed and the home was simply built. But there is one more piece, because a thing won too easy is not believed, and Tom Halloran did not yet half believe that he was allowed to stop fighting. It came in the shape of a man named Salt Deaver, who ran fights the way the man in the mining camp had, and who came through Maddox Flat in the late summer with a young slugger named Royce Tanner in tow and a fat roll of money in his coat. Deaver had heard the great Tom Halloran was holed up on a horse ranch in the Antler Creek Valley. Deaver had a proposition. The boy Tanner was hungry and unbeaten and looking to make a name, and what better name to make it on than Halloran's? And there was a purse in it, a real purse, the kind that buys a man's pride back for the old champion to step in the ring one last time and let the young one try him. He laid it out at the Quill's own gate, having ridden out bold as brass, with Tom standing there and Nora standing there and me standing there, and I watched it work on Tom. I won't lie to you. I watched the old hunger come up in him like water in a well, a real purse, a way to come to Nora with something in his hands at last, even if the hands themselves were ruined, the chance to be worth it. "The hands won't close," Tom said. "Don't need to close to take a beating for money," Deaver said, and grinned, and it was the ugliest true thing anybody said that whole summer. Tom looked at the money. He looked at it a long time. And then, and this is the part I carried out of that valley and have told to younger men a dozen times since, because it is the only thing I know worth teaching. He looked away from it, and he looked at Nora, and he said to Deaver, without any drama in it at all, "No." "Think on it," Deaver started. "I've done all the thinking on it I'm going to do," Tom said. "I spent 15 years thinking on it. I'm done." He put what was left of his hand on the gate latch. "There was a long while I'd have crawled to that ring for the money and called it pride. Truth is I was running. A man'll do an awful lot of fighting to keep from going home." He opened the gate on his own side to go back in. "I'm home. Get off her land." Deaver got. The boy Tanner, to his credit, tipped his hat to Nora as they rode off, and I have heard he turned out decent and fought clean and is doing well, but that is another story and not mine to tell. When they were gone, Nora stood a while looking at the dust of them, and then she said, not looking at Tom, "You wanted that money." "I did," he said. "Lord help me, I wanted it." "And you said no." "I did." "Why?" He took a long breath. Because the money was for the man who thought he had to win you, he said. And I'm trying to be the one who already lost and came home anyway and found out that was the only way I was ever going to get to keep you. He held out the ruined hands open, the only way they would go. I can't make a fist anymore, Nora. I expect that's the best thing that ever happened to me. A man with hands like this can't do anything but hold on. She married him in the fall. There was no fuss to it. She'd have allowed no fuss. Just the circuit preacher and me to stand up for Tom and a neighbor woman to stand up for Nora, and the horses watching over the corral rail like they had an interest in the proceedings, which I suppose they did. She kept her own name on the ranch books. I asked her once, years on, why, and she said the quill had been hers before he came, and a thing built ought to keep the name of who built it. And Tom had laughed and agreed, and that was all there was to it. They were partners in the way you rarely see. She the head for the books and the buying, he the hands, such as they were, for the gentling, and the outfit grew because each of them was better with the other one there. I stayed on 2 seasons, and then the road got back into me, the way it does, and I drifted, and I have been drifting in a quiet way ever since. But I went back to Antler Creek the once, near 20 years after, an old man myself by then, and I found Tom Halloran gray as a badger sitting on that same porch with a half-broke filly's lead rope looped over a wrist that still couldn't grip, and Nora beside him with the account book on her knee, the two of them arguing comfortably about the price of oats, and a couple of grown hands they'd raised up from boys working the corrals below. He saw me coming and he knew me, and he came down to the gate slow, both of us slow by then, and he took my arm in both his ruined hands, which was the only way he had ever been able to hold anything since the day I drove him down out of the hollow. "You came back," he said. "The horses brought me," I said, which was our old joke, and he laughed, and Nora called from the porch that there was supper, and it was not just supper, and Tom Halloran put his arm around my shoulders and walked me up to the house he had spent 15 years running from and the rest of his life glad he'd stopped. And I thought, as I think now telling it, there are men who win everything and come home to nothing, and there are men who lose everything and come home, finally, to find that the only purse worth fighting for had been sitting on a porch the whole time, with a rifle in the crook of her arm, deciding she was not done with him after all. He never made another fist. He never needed to. The last thing he ever held, they tell me, was her hand, and he held it the only way he knew how by then, which was the only way that ever mattered with everything he had left and no chance of letting go.